Grandpa, my parents are going to take all your money tonight, whispered my 8-year-old granddaughter, Sophie Lawson. For a moment I thought I'd misheard her. Maybe the noise from the birthday party had muddled her words. But then the sentence landed, heavy and cold, like a sheet of ice plunging straight down my spine. My chest tightened, my pulse pounded in my ears. I'd faced storms on construction sites, watched steel beams sway in the wind 100 feet above the ground, but nothing had ever made my stomach drop like this. I stared at her, searching her face for some hint of a joke, a misunderstanding, anything. But Sophie's eyes were wide, serious, glistening in the warm light of the kitchen. The laughter and music from the living room, Vanessa's forced laugh. Ethan's too loud voice faded into a distorted hum, like I'd been shoved underwater. I tightened my arm protectively around her small shoulders, masking the volcanic anger clawing its way up my throat. That's a pretty serious thing to say, kiddo. What makes you think that? Her glance flicked toward the living room. Vanessa and Ethan stood there, the picture of doting hosts. Pink streamers dangled from the doorways. Balloons drifted lazily against the ceiling. To anyone else, it was a wholesome family scene. But now, through Sophie's terrified eyes, I saw it for what it really was, a stage, and they were actors hiding a darker script. I heard them talking last night, Sophie whispered quickly, as if saying it too loud might summon them. They said they have papers from the bank, and they're going to fix the problem. I didn't need clarification. I knew exactly what problem they meant. For years, I'd been their safety net, covering Ethan's mortgage, repairing his car, paying Sophie's tuition each time, convincing myself it was the last bailout. And now, like vultures circling a weakened animal, they were ready to strip me of everything I'd built over a lifetime. The outrage burned so hot I could almost taste it metallic and bitter at the back of my tongue. My mind, long retired from the battles of business, snapped back into focus. Reading people, spotting angles, countering betrayal, those instincts roared back to life. Tonight was supposed to be about my granddaughter's cake and presents. Instead, it had turned into a battlefield for my legacy. I pressed a kiss to Sophie's hair, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I murmured. "Grandpa's got this." "Oh." And as I looked past her, straight toward the smiling faces of my son and his wife, I swore to myself, if they thought they'd make their move tonight, they'd learn exactly how it feels to be on the wrong end of a checkmate. If this story touched your heart, press 1 inch the comments. If you think it could have been handled differently, press 2. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? From the kitchen doorway, I watched Sophie skip back to the living room, her ponytail bouncing, the weight of her secret masked beneath the carefree rhythm of a child's steps. No one else in that room had any idea what she'd just told me. But I did, and now, every movement felt like part of a slow, deliberate setup. Vanessa bent to smooth the hem of her dress, her smile wide and camera perfect for the guests. But I caught at that quick, almost imperceptible glance she shot toward Ethan. It wasn't affection. It was confirmation. A silent cue and a plan I hadn't been invited to join. Ethan didn't return it. He was too busy pumping the hand of some neighbor from down the street, the kind of man who would forget our names before the night was over. Seattle sunlight spilled through the tall windows, throwing a warm glow over the old craftsman-style house. It looked picture-perfect, almost magazine-ready with its fresh paint and polished woodwork. But I knew the truth. My money had paid for that gleam. My sweat, my years, my sacrifices. When Linda passed away 3 years ago, the silence in our home had been unbearable, thick, crushing, almost physical. Sophie had been my lifeline, dragging me back into life with her soccer games, her messy art projects, her phone calls about whatever book she was reading. Ethan and Vanessa had seemed grateful back then, grateful, or maybe just patient enough to wait for the right moment. Over those years, I'd written the checks without hesitation. The accidental missed mortgage payment that was supposedly a one-time slip, the temporary grocery help that became a monthly transfer, the urgent transmission repair that somehow morphed into a full-engine rebuild. Each time, Ethan wore an embarrassed smile, and Vanessa exhaled in visible relief. And I, fool that I was, told myself I was helping them back on their feet. But Ethan had always been pliable. Not weak exactly, but easily steered. In high school, it was his troublemaking friends. Now it was Vanessa, with her perfect nails wrapped around the wheel. She was dangerous in a way most people never saw, too smart, too smooth, never asking outright. She'd circle the idea like a hawk until you thought it was yours. A few weeks ago, she stood in my kitchen, sipping my coffee, her eyes roaming over the place like a real estate agent taking inventory. "Rick," she'd said lightly, "don't you think this house is a bit much for one person? There are some incredible retirement communities now. Meals, housekeeping, everything taken care of. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance anymore." Before I could answer, Ethan had cut in with a distraction: Sophie's softball schedule. I think, but Vanessa's gaze lingered on my granite countertops and the appliances Linda and I had chosen together. At the time, I dismissed it. But then Helen Grant, my neighbor, casually mentioned seeing Ethan and Vanessa downtown last Tuesday, leaving First Pacific Bank with a thick stack of papers. She'd assumed it was mortgage refinancing. I'd filed it away. But now, after Sophie's warning, that memory hit like a gut punch. From the couch, Mrs. Collins waved me over. "Sophie's such a thoughtful little girl," she said warmly. "She asked me the other day if grandparents and parents ever disagree about big decisions. Of—" I forced a small chuckle, masking the spark of fury in my chest. "And what did you tell her?" "That families work it out with love and honesty," Mrs. Collins replied with a smile, though a faint crease lingered between her brows. She'd sensed something, too. In the corner, Sophie tore the wrapping off a gift, but her eyes kept darting toward me, searching for a sign that I was still in control. I gave her a nod, and a smile, meant to steady her. Inside, though, my mind was already running battle scenarios. Linda used to say I had two strengths: building things, and spotting when someone was trying to tear them down. Tonight, my son and his wife would find out just how dangerous those skills could be in the hands of a man with nothing left to lose. The party slogged on in a haze of forced laughter and strained politeness. Each moment stretched thin over the tension simmering beneath the surface. Ethan stuck to me like a shadow, ushering over coworkers I'd never met, and neighbors from 2 streets over, performing his role like he was auditioning for Son of the Year. "Dad, this is Mike from work," he said, his hand gripping a tall man's shoulder with a familiarity that was clearly for show. "I've told him all about you, how you built Lawson Construction from scratch, how you taught me everything I know about business." The lie was so brazen it almost made me laugh. Ethan had learned nothing from my business except how to siphon resources without getting his hands dirty. But Mike smiled, shook my hand, and moved on, none the wiser. Across the room, Vanessa's eyes were already on me, warm, inviting, and as calculated as a chess move. She crossed the floor with a plate of appetizers, every step as practiced as a model hitting her mark. "Rick, you have to try these," she said, setting them in my hand as though it were some precious gesture. "I made them with you in mind." It was almost insulting. Vanessa had never once done anything with me in mind. She didn't have to. My open wallet had been her safety net for years. Gratitude wasn't part of the exchange. I thanked her anyway, masking my disgust, while in the corner of my vision, Sophie quietly set aside a card without opening it. Her eyes kept darting toward me, scanning for a signal. The music dipped as the kids headed to the dining room for cake. That was my moment. I slipped away down the hallway lined with family photographs, Sophie's gap-toothed smile in school pictures, Ethan and Vanessa's wedding day, Linda cradling newborn Sophie in her arms. I paused at Linda's portrait, brushing the frame with my fingertips. My wife would have seen through all of this in an instant. Soft footsteps approached. "Grandpa?" Sophie's voice was barely above a whisper. She glanced toward the living room before edging closer, her party dress catching the light in faint glimmers. "They're going to do it tonight," she breathed. "After everyone leaves." The words hit harder the second time. I crouched down so we were eye level. "Tell me exactly what you heard." Her hands twisted the hem of her dress. "Mom said you have too much money for an old man living alone. She told Dad the papers from the bank would make it all legal." Dad asked, "What if he finds out?" And she said it would be too late by then. Papers from the bank. Helen Grant's passing comment from Tuesday slammed into place like the final brick in a wall I hadn't realized was being built around me. "What kind of papers?" I asked, keeping my voice calm even as my mind lit up with possibilities. Power of attorney, conservatorship filings, maybe even court orders waiting for a judge's signature. Sophie shook her head. "I don't know. But Mom said you wouldn't be able to make decisions anymore, and that we'd all be better off." The venom in those words burned through me. Better off? Who exactly was we? I gripped her small shoulders gently but firmly. Sweetheart, you did the right thing telling me, but we can't let them know we know. Can you act like everything's normal? She nodded. But then, God help me, she asked. Will you still love me if Mom and Dad get mad at you? My chest tightened. Sophie, there's nothing your parents could do that would make me stop loving you. Nothing. Some of the tension left her shoulders. We returned to the dining room just as the guests began singing Happy Birthday. Ethan stood behind Sophie, beaming for the cameras, his hand resting on the chair of the little girl he was using as part of his cover story. Perfect for a family album if you didn't know the plot. For the next hour, I smiled, laughed, even asked for a second slice of cake. But my eyes never left Ethan and Vanessa. Every coded glance, every well-timed interruption when a conversation edged toward finances, it was all part of a carefully rehearsed dance. When the last guest slipped out, Ethan moved in. Dad, stick around after everyone leaves, okay? We want to go over those family plans we mentioned. Vanessa joined him, voice sweet but too quick. It's nothing scary, just making sure you're taken care of. Taken care of. The phrase rang in my ears like an alarm bell. I offered a faint smile. I've got a headache. I'll head home. Ethan's smile faltered. Dad, wait, we need to talk tonight. It's important. Vanessa's tone sharpened. We've been planning this for weeks. You'll feel better once it's sorted. Tomorrow, I said evenly. Family isn't going anywhere. They didn't like it. I could see it in the way their eyes flicked toward each other, irritation creeping through the cracks in their performance. As I stepped into the cool Seattle night, I felt their frustration clinging to me like smoke. They thought I'd given them a delay. What they didn't realize was that I'd just taken the first move in a game they thought they were controlling. And I never lose at my own game. The second my tires crunched over the gravel of my driveway, the headache I'd been faking evaporated. My pulse was steady now, too steady. The house was silent, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort you, but sharpens your thinking until every thought cuts. I didn't even shrug off my coat. I went straight to my office, flipped on the desk lamp, and pushed aside the photo of Linda that hung over the safe. The combination her birthday spun under my fingers like muscle memory. The heavy door swung open to reveal my private ledger of the last 3 years. Mortgage payments, car repairs, tuition checks for Sophie. Line after line of withdrawals, each neatly dated and documented with the same meticulous precision I'd used to run Lawson Construction for 40 years. 247 transactions, $70,000. Individually, they could almost pass for generosity, a father helping his son, a grandfather helping his family. But spread across my desk in a neat, damning sequence, they told a darker truth. Conditioning. I'd been trained to say yes without hesitation, to normalize the taking, until the size of the ask no longer shocked me. Vanessa's honey-coated suggestion about retirement communities came back to me now, how she'd sold it as concern for my comfort, her eyes sweeping over my countertops like she already owned them. And Ethan, changing the subject with all the subtlety of a guilty man. This wasn't about my comfort. It wasn't even just about my money. It was about control. Helen Grant's voice from earlier in the week echoed in my head, papers from the bank. And now Sophie's whispered warning tied it together with surgical precision. Tonight, they'd been ready to make their move. Not anymore. I reached for my phone and found the number I hadn't dialed in months. Charlie Bennett, vice president at First Pacific Bank, and one of the few men I trusted. He picked up on the second ring. Rick, long time. Charlie, sorry for the late call. I need a quick answer. Have you had any recent inquiries about conservatorships or power of attorney? There was a pause, the kind that told me he was weighing his words. Interesting you'd ask. Just last week, your son and daughter-in-law came in very interested in both. They were pushing for expedited timelines, medical competency evaluations, the whole package. A cold knot settled in my chest. They didn't say who it was for? They didn't have to, Rick. I'm not blind. And whatever they're doing, it's moving fast. That was all I needed. We wrapped the call with a promise to meet, though he didn't yet know how soon that meeting would be. Leaning back, I saw the play in full. They'd get me to sign over power of attorney, grease the wheels for a declining capacity diagnosis, and once the ink dried, they'd control every cent, every decision, every part of my life. But they'd miscalculated. I wasn't the one in check. I scrolled to another number, Karen Mitchell, the notary who had sat through more Lawson construction contracts than I could count. She was sharp, discreet, and allergic to lies. Karen, you free tomorrow morning? For you? Always. What's going on? Family financial matter. Sensitive. I need you here at 10 sharp. I'll bring my seal, and I'll keep my eyes open. Good. By the time I hung up, the counterattack was fully formed. Tomorrow, they'd bring their papers, expecting me to sign. Instead, they'd walk into a room where two seasoned professionals, one from their own bank, would watch them try to corner me. I glanced toward the kitchen, where Sophie's crayon drawing still clung to the fridge. A crooked little house, two stick figures labeled Grandpa and me, both smiling under a bright sun. Tomorrow, I'd make damn sure that picture stayed the truth, and not a relic of what we used to be. That night, I slept in jagged bursts, the way I used to before a multi-million-dollar bid, half my mind resting, the other half running scenarios like blueprints in a storm. By dawn, I was already at my desk, refining my counterattack until every move was deliberate. Step 1 was simple. Make them believe they'd already won. At 7:15, I called Ethan. I let my voice sound thin, slow, like each word was an effort. Son, I've been thinking about what you and Vanessa said last night. A pause. Not long, but just enough to hear the anticipation coil in him. Yeah? I think you're right. I'm not keeping up with things the way I used to. Maybe it's time you took over. The relief in his voice was immediate, sloppy. Dad, that's great. Vanessa will be so relieved. I want to do it properly, I continued, pitching my tone just above resignation. I've arranged for a notary to come this morning. That way everything's legal. He hesitated just for a breath. Perfect. We can be there at 10. Good, I said, adding lightly. Oh, and I've invited Charlie Bennett over too. He can review my accounts while we're all here. The silence on the other end was weighted, a fraction too long. Yeah, sure, that makes sense. After we hung up, I called Karen Mitchell to confirm. 10 o'clock, she said briskly. I'll set up in your office. By 9:30, my house was staged like a set. My desk was stripped bare except for Sophie's newest crayon masterpiece, a single pen and a glass of water. Linda's portrait overlooked it all, watchful, steady. I dressed the part, an old cardigan with a loose button, worn slacks, slippers. My hair slightly mussed, posture a little slouched. I looked like a man halfway surrendered exactly what they wanted to see. For the first 5 minutes. At 9:45, Karen arrived, her eyes sweeping the setup in a quick, approving pass. You want me to witness from the start? Every word, I said. At exactly 10 o'clock, Charlie stepped in, portfolio under his arm. Morning, Rick. Ready for that portfolio review? More ready than you know, I replied. 10 minutes later, Ethan and Vanessa arrived, sleek leather folder in hand. Ethan's smile was wide enough to crack. Vanessa's eyes scanned the room and locked briefly on Karen and Charlie. How thoughtful of you to have them here, she said, the sugar in her voice almost hiding the tension underneath. This will make things so much easier. Exactly, I agreed, gesturing to the chairs across from me. Let's make sure everything's official. They sat, and Vanessa opened the folder, revealing a stack of neatly tabbed documents with yellow flags marking where they expected my signature. Dad, these give us authority to help with your finances, medical appointments, daily decisions, Ethan began, his voice oiled and practiced. Think of it as a safety net, Vanessa added, smiling as if she were offering me tea instead of a legal noose. I picked up the first document, holding it between my fingers like something foreign. It all seems overwhelming. I used to understand this kind of thing better. That's why we need to do this now, Vanessa said softly, the edges of urgency threading her tone. I let the quiet stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then I turned to Charlie. Would you mind telling everyone what Ethan and Vanessa asked you about at the bank last week? Vanessa's hand stopped mid-gesture. Ethan's smile faltered. Charlie adjusted his glasses, his voice even. They inquired about conservatorships specifically, expedited court filings, mental competency evaluations, and immediate asset control. Karen's pen paused over her notary log. Is that what these papers are for? Vanessa's voice sharpened. That's not. We were just gathering information. I set the document down and straightened in my chair, every trace of frailty gone. My voice was calm but hard enough to cut glass. You were gathering instructions on how to declare me incompetent and strip me of everything I've built over 40 years, and you plan to do it today. The air in the room changed. Heavy, unforgiving. Ethan's jaw clenched, but nothing came out. Vanessa's eyes flicked between the folder and my face, calculating. And in that stillness, the balance shifted. For the first time since this began, they understood exactly what they were up against. Vanessa was the first to find her voice, though the gloss over it was cracking. Rick, you're misunderstanding this is about protecting you. We were just... Protecting me? I cut in, my tone like a blade. By researching how to have me declared mentally incompetent? By lining up a care facility so you could move me out of my own home while you managed my assets? Karen's pen stilled above her journal. Mr. Lawson, are you saying these documents were prepared under false pretenses? I'm saying, I replied, each word slow and deliberate, that they were prepared for a theft, a legal theft, and here's the proof. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a thick, worn folder. As I opened it, the paper edges whispered against each other like they were eager to speak. One by one, I laid out the records across the desk: mortgage payments, car repairs, Sophie's tuition checks, each page stamped with the date, the amount, and my meticulous notes on the reason. 247 transactions over 3 years, I said, my voice steady but cold. $70,000 in so-called emergencies and temporary help. Every single one approved because I believed I was helping my son and daughter-in-law. Ethan's face went crimson. Dad, those were real expenses. Maybe they started that way, I said evenly. But over time, they became something else. You trained me, conditioned me to say yes, so the final ask wouldn't feel like a leap, it would feel like the next step. I tapped the stack of legal papers between us. This. The end game. Vanessa's mask slipped. You're twisting this. We love you. I leaned forward, my gaze locking on hers. Love doesn't come with a bank visit to learn how to seize control of someone's life before they've even drawn their last healthy breath. Charlie's voice cut in, calm but lethal. I can confirm they asked me about emergency conservatorship procedures. They didn't stumble through the questions, they knew exactly what to ask. Karen added without looking up. And in my experience, legitimate family planning doesn't involve springing documents on someone who hasn't agreed to the terms. The room went still except for the ticking of the wall clock. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her tone shifting from syrup to steel. So what now? You just cut us off? Pretend we don't exist? That, I said, leaning back, depends on whether you're ready to accept the consequences you've earned. Ethan finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Dad, we were scared. About the future. About money. You should have been scared, I snapped. About losing my trust. And you should have been terrified about what happens when a man who built his life from nothing decides he's not going to be your mark anymore. The false confidence they'd carried in with him was gone. Panic had crept in, raw and unguarded. Vanessa's heel tapped against the carpet in a staccato rhythm. Ethan kept glancing at the folder like he could will it out of existence. This was going to be easy, wasn't it? I said quietly, the words hitting harder for their calm delivery. One signature, and you'd own every dollar, every property, every decision. But you forgot the first rule of business: never assume your opponent isn't watching the board. Karen closed her notary journal with a definitive thump. Charlie set his pen down, the sound louder than it needed to be in the silence. I looked at both of them. We're not finished here. The next step is putting protections in place, so this can never happen again. Ethan swallowed hard. Vanessa's jaw flexed. Whatever outcome they had envisioned when they walked into my house, they knew now those plans were dead. I let the silence stretch until it was taut enough to snap. They shifted in their chairs, eyes flicking between me and the unopened folder on the desk. Then I reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out a second set of papers, thicker, heavier, bound with a bright red clip that caught the light. This, I said, setting them down between us with deliberate care, is my new will and trust agreement, effective immediately. Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes narrowing into slits. What do you mean new? I mean, I said evenly, that as of this morning, my entire estate, $2.3 million in liquid assets, 3 rental properties, and this house will no longer pass to either of you. Every cent, every square foot goes into an educational trust for Sophie. She'll have access when she turns 21 for college, graduate school, maybe seed money for her own business. But not 1 cent will be within your reach. Ethan's head jerked up. Dad, I raised a hand, stopping him mid-word. I'm not finished. If and only if you want any part of this family's future, there are conditions. First, you sign a formal renunciation of any claim to my estate. Second, over the next 12 months, you demonstrate genuine change, steady employment, responsible spending, and putting Sophie's needs before your own. Third, you rebuild my trust, not with apologies, but with actions. Vanessa's voice cracked as her composure slipped. You can't just cut us out like that. Actually, Karen said from her corner without looking up, he can, and once I notarize this, it's legally binding. Karen, I said, sliding the stack toward her, if you would, The sharp, final click of her notary seal filled the air. Charlie leaned in to witness my signature, his pen scratching across the page like a closing argument. Ethan looked stunned. Dad, please, we made a mistake, but we can fix it. I met his gaze, my son's gaze, older now, but clouded with desperation. Then fix it, but not with schemes or shortcuts. You fix it by proving my granddaughter matters more than my bank account. Vanessa's lips thinned. And what are we supposed to live on while we're proving ourselves? The same way millions of other families do, I said. Honest work, careful budgeting, sacrifices when necessary. The mortgage payments stop today. The car payments end today. You both have degrees. Use them. Her eyes flashed with anger, but she stayed silent. Ethan dropped his gaze. I'm sorry, Dad. I know it doesn't erase anything, but I am. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I did. But belief comes later, if it comes at all. Then prove it. And understand this, if you try anything like this again, there won't be a conversation. There will only be a lawyer. Karen pressed the final seal into place and slid the papers back to me. All set. Copies should go to your attorney immediately. They will, I said. Charlie stood, closing his portfolio. Rick, in my 20 years at the bank, I've seen plenty of people blindsided. What you did today? That's rare. Most never see it coming. Thanks, Charlie. And thank you both for being here to witness the truth. Karen packed her notary kit, giving Ethan and Vanessa one last, level look before heading out. Charlie followed. When the door closed, it was just the three of us. The air in the room was heavier now, like something unspoken still hung between us. Ethan kept his eyes down. Vanessa stared out the window, arms folded like armor. This is the line in the sand, I said. You choose which side you want to be on. And remember, Sophie is watching. She's smarter than you think. Vanessa stayed silent. Ethan gave a small, stiff nod before standing. We'll talk later. I listened to their footsteps fade down the hall, the front door closing with a solid, echoing thunk. For the first time in days, I let my shoulders drop. The trap had sprung and the damage was contained for now. But I knew this wasn't over. It never is when the stakes are family. 3 hours later, a soft knock came at the front door. When I opened it, Sophie stood there, her backpack hanging off one shoulder, wisps of hair escaping her ponytail and catching the afternoon light. Mom said you wanted to see me, she said quietly. I stepped aside. Come in, kiddo. We need to talk about some grown-up things. We settled on the couch, the late-day sun spilling across the living room in warm gold. She curled her legs beneath her, watching me with that same unblinking, steady gaze Linda used to give me whenever she was deciding whether I was telling the whole truth. This is about what I told you at my party, isn't it? She asked. Partly, I said. Your mom and dad made some bad choices about money, and there are going to be consequences. But none of that changes how much I love you. Her brow furrowed. Are they in trouble? They have to work hard to earn back trust, I told her. But I want you to know this. Your future is safe. I've set things up so you can go to any college you want, study anything that excites you, veterinary school, engineering, teaching whatever makes you happy. Her eyes widened. Even veterinary school, that's really expensive. Especially veterinary school, I said, smiling. And if you change your mind, the money will still be there for whatever path you choose. Oh, what about Mom and Dad? They're going to have to learn to take care of themselves and you the right way. If they do, maybe the family can heal. If they don't, you and I will still have each other. That's a promise. She scooted closer, looping her arms around me. I love you, Grandpa. I held her tight, feeling the warmth of her trust seep into the cracks this week had left in me. I love you too, Sophie. More than you'll ever know. She pulled back, grinning. Can we look at college stuff now? I chuckled. We've got all the time in the world. I reached for my laptop, and together we began scrolling through photos of campuses, her excitement bubbling over at the possibilities. Outside, the roses Linda planted years ago had started to bloom, their color rich against the deep green leaves. And for the first time in days, I felt something solid under my feet. No matter what storms were still coming, I'd kept the most important promise I'd ever made, protecting the future of the one person who truly mattered.